Hello and welcome to the Crimson Stitchery, a video channel about making all things beautiful and useful. My name is Anushka. You can find me elsewhere online as Asawa Telling, and links to this video can be found in the show notes below here on YouTube. So hi, how are you doing? I just want to start the episode by acknowledging my last episode, in which I was quite manic, and people left me a lot of really nice comments, and there was just generally a lot of joy shared because if you didn't watch, if you're a new subscriber, in my last episode I basically got dressed up in the sparkliest and campest things that I had in my wardrobe that I had made myself, and my own homemade items, homemade but of camp, and yeah, I got dressed up in them just for the sake of the podcast and recorded it feeling a little bit delirious, and I had, you know, so many lovely comments, people reaching out to me. It was so great to hear that I'd inspired a few people to get dressed up in the fanciest thing or the sparkliest thing that they had in their wardrobe. So lovely to hear, so thank you so much for all the love you shared with me today. It feels a little bit more toned down today, a little bit darker, but I'm also a little bit pressed for time, so we'll see how things go. We have a house guest staying this weekend, so I'm just grabbing a little bit of time while the house is quiet and other people have gone out. So without further ado, let's get straight to it. This week I have quite a bit of knitting and crochet and making to share with you, and then I'm also going to be sharing some book recommendations at the end in Conversational Threads, which is a section that we haven't had for a while, just because you can't do everything. You can't do everything however much I would like to, however much I've tried, and it's taken me quite a long time in my life, in my adult life, to realise that and come to accept it and to sort of do what I can within my abilities. So yeah, thanks for being along for the ride. So without any further ado, what's in my knitting basket that I've got here, starting to feel a little bit rickety, if I'm honest with you. It's pretty old. Yeah, that needs a little bit of TLC possibly, but it's still standing up quite well. And in there I've got my finished crochet net bag. Merci. Thank you very much to my French and French speaking viewers who commented and told me that in French this item is called un filet, which means a net bag basically, because in English I was saying last episode how it's kind of weird that this item is called a French market bag. And I really enjoyed hearing about the sort of reminiscing that people had in the comments about using these in the past before plastic bags became much more widespread. And also thank you very much to everyone who gave me advice, because I was concerned that this bag, which I've crocheted intending to use for picnics, was going to be a little bit small, but I've been told that it's going to really stretch out of shape and get really big. And also it's got very long straps, which people have told me that are going to stretch out of shape once there's lots of heavy items in the bag. But I don't intend to use this as a regular shopping bag, just as more of an occasional picnic bag. And so I think it's going to be okay. And also I had the idea of maybe sewing a leather kind of bag shoulder padding thing. You know, when you get over the strap, sometimes you have like a leather bit that sort of stabilizes it, and yeah, just generally makes it a bit more secure. So yeah, just to recap, I crocheted this on the tiniest tiny crochet hook. I think it was 2mm or something like that, which was my mum's from the 70s when she used to like to do crochet. Also using a ball of vintage crochet cotton from the same period, the 1970s. And I made this as part of my Stashless 2020 initiative, which is a year-long community endeavour to reduce our stash and think quite carefully about our consumption practices. So I'm pretty happy about this. It was, I'm not going to lie, it was quite tedious to make. It was a lot easier than I thought, because basically it only uses 2 stitches, which is a very basic foundation chain, and then it uses the most basic single crochet, which is the American term. I believe the English term is doubles, which again is just the most basic one. So yeah, actually it was pretty easy to do. You could definitely do it if you were a beginner. And I used a free pattern on Ravelry, and the instructions were a little bit confusing, but I think if you just persevere with it, you can get there in the end. And yeah, what else to say about it? I kind of enjoyed it, but it was very tedious, especially because I added the longer straps. So at one point you have to go all the way around this whole perimeter of the bag, all the way around, and that is an awful lot of stitches. and yeah, just kind of had to crack on with it. But I was getting a lot of pain in my hands while crocheting this, and several people commented with lots of suggestions about different techniques and ways of holding the hook and holding the yarn, and I'm definitely going to bear that in mind. I was doing my best to try and work with what I had, so I didn't want to buy at the time one of those ergonomical silicone handle crochet hooks, because I was just trying to use what I had. But actually, having gone through this and having felt the pain in my hands, I think I am going to explore that for my next crochet project, which is probably going to be in the summer, or later on in the summer, because I've got quite a few things that I want to crack on with, as I'll be telling you all about in this episode. So yeah, it's always such a toss-up when you're kind of investing in skills, because obviously when you first start something, and I consider myself a beginner crocheter, when you first start a craft, you don't know how much to invest in it, and you know, I feel like when you sort of wade yourself in a little bit more and have a little bit more experience, then you might feel like it's you're more willing to spend more and upgrade your equipment and so on. But it's sort of like at what point are you willing to take the plunge? And you know, buying an extra crochet hook, it's not really about the money. It's more just, as I said, the principle I've been having in Stashless 2020 of trying to push myself to see what I can do with what I have. But I do think that in this case, one of those powder-coated steel crochet hooks that's very cold and very hard to hold is just not really doing it for my physical ability, and I do think it's worth having like better designed ergonomical tools when possible, just to cause less tension, because I think we could all do with less tension in our lives, right? Okay, so that is that, and then I've got a half finished object, which is the next sock. It's hiding. It's the next sock in my warm weather sock collection that I've been designing over the last few months. I'm not going to show it up to the camera, but it's quite dark, as you can see. But the yarn's pretty special because it's actually quite sparkly, but I'll go into more detail about that when I have the next podcast episode. But yeah. Thank you very much to everybody who has been purchasing my sock knitting patterns, my newest designs, over the last few weeks. Thank you so much, and I'm so bowled over by the fact that some of you are such swift knitters and have just cast on straight away, and there have been lots and lots of finished objects appearing on Ravelry and over on Instagram as well. So this, if you're new to the channel, this is part of a 6-month-long knit-along that I have been running called the Crimson Sockalong, which is for knitting any of my sock knitting patterns, the designs that I've produced for the Crimson Stitchery. You can join in on Instagram with a hashtag Crimson Sockalong, and in our Ravelry group there's also a chatter thread to show off what you guys have been up to there. So it's been super nice for me to see all of that. I'm so excited. And yeah, there's going to be a range of prizes which I'm still not quite ready to announce yet, but I might do that maybe later on next month. But basically I'm just trying to say that there are prizes for anyone that takes part, and there are also additional prizes for people that manage to knit 6 of my patterns, 6 different patterns. So that's a different pattern a month, and obviously that's going to be fewer people, so you probably are going to be in for a stronger chance of winning a prize if you decide to opt for that category. So yes, part of my warm weather socks collection, and that's basically saying that I was designing socks with holes in them that were well fitted, in a nutshell. And this sock design has basically got as many holes as I could fit in the lace pattern. So I'm going to hold off speaking too much more about that, but suffice it to say that one is done. I need to do a second one, and then I've decided to also knit the shorty socks sample. So yeah, it's been really nice to have this sort of challenge for myself to keep designing and keep working on the patterns whilst also having people knit up my patterns as part of the knit along simultaneously. It's been really inspiring, and at the same time everyone has been very, you know, flexible and excited for me and supportive of my work, because my stuff doesn't ever quite come out at the beginning of the month, and that's just because I'm juggling quite a lot of things in my life, and you know, unexpected things that just come up in one's personal life. You kind of always have to plan for that unexpected, I guess. So yeah, that's that. And then the next thing that I've been working on is my yellow cardigan, my painfully yellow cardigan, that again has been knitted up as part of Stashless 2020, the stash busting initiative, and I'm doing it from a vintage pattern, and it's happening very slowly because it's a cabled garment in a 4-ply fingering weight gauge, so very thin yarn. And it's sort of one of those annoying things where I bought this yarn on holiday to make a scarf and then decided I didn't want a yellow scarf, that I wanted a sweater, but I've ended up having to order more yarn to have the right yardage for the sweater. So it is stash busting overall, but it has required me to buy yarn, so it's a bit annoying, but hey ho. And in between working on the sock, I've been working on this as sort of just a bit of a break for my hands, for my sanity. And I'm doing quite well on it. So I have completed the back now and 2 fronts. And it's this lovely cable pattern that hopefully is showing up on camera, cable and rib. And I've been making some modifications, one of which is that I did a 3 needle bind off with short rows on the shoulders, instead of casting off that kind of stepped shoulder slope. So that was really nice, really streamlined. And I'm not sure if it's coming up on camera, but you can kind of get a sense of the two different dye lots. Like the fronts is the much more acidy yellow with a hint of green, which is actually what I liked. And then the back is a much more true kind of buttercup yellow, which I like a lot less. So basically and that's because I got the yarn from different dye lots because of this issue of having to get more yarn. So I'm trying to get the more acid green yellow to be at the front. So what I'm going to have to do is, because I think I'm going to run out of the acid yellow, when it comes to the sleeves, I think I'll start knitting with the acid yellow in the forearms, and then when it comes to the upper arms, I'll probably alternate every other row or something like that with the buttercup yellow. But I'm not quite sure. More thought needed on that, because you really can tell the difference between the 2 yellows by eye. So yeah, I've started the sleeve there, and I've got this necktie as well that's part of it that I did in the acid yellow. So it's like everything from the front, all of the kind of main action that you see will be in the shade that I like, the acid yellow shade. And yeah, just kind of trying to make it work really. So yeah, I would appreciate some thoughts on that actually. Should I go with my plan of doing like half of the sleeve acid yellow and then kind of alternate like almost like a stripe with the buttercup up the forearm? Or should I just alternate the stripe with the buttercup all the way through, whilst maintaining the cuff in the acid, so the largest portion will still be acid? You know, will it be weird if only half of the sleeve is alternated in buttercup? Yeah, I'd really appreciate your experienced thoughts and advice on that. Thank you. And that's it really. It doesn't look like a lot, but it's been a pretty busy couple of weeks, to be honest with you. There's been a lot on, and yeah, that's all I have to say about that really. I did some sewing because I had to make some masks, because very bizarrely masks have now become mandatory on public transport in London. Whilst we're very rarely taking public transport because of working from home and furlough and stuff, you know, it's nice to have the option. But the reason that I say it's really bizarre is because, you know, we've been in lockdown conditions since the middle of March, and masks have only just recently become mandatory, so the whole thing is super bizarre, and we hate the government. We have no faith in their leadership at all at this point and their decision making. So yeah, what can you do? So yeah, I made a bunch of masks, but they've gone in the washing machine, and I will talk about them, you know, maybe next episode when I've got them all amassed. Well, I made 2 and I cut out a bunch more, and I have to make more still, because obviously I've been designated mask maker in my family, like many of you, I'm sure. Yeah, I really didn't enjoy making them, to be honest with you. I found it very tedious, but what can you do? Just have to do some more really. Yeah. So that's really it for now. No mending, no sewing, been really far too busy with work, and yeah, just trying to sort out life in general, and enjoy life. So what I thought I'd do is conversational threads, and I'll just talk a little bit about some recent books that I've been reading. So I've been reading a little bit about botany and ecology, which are subjects that I have no formal training in, only a very keen amateur interest in gardening, which was inherited or passed down from my grandparents, so it's in the family to love gardening. But I think they did study it, they did do some courses, I think when they were sort of having a career change when they were in their 50s. So they do have some formal knowledge, so obviously that was quite a while ago. But me, I just sort of picked some things up from them and watched TV. You know, we've recently discovered gardening YouTube, which has been really lovely. But yeah, I'm very much an amateur. Anything you know, these botany, herbology, sort of herbal medicines, exploring wild plants and foraging and all that sort of thing. Whereas, you know, what I am an expert, but you know, what I have a lot of experience, skills, training, and knowledge of is textiles, basically. So the plant side of things has been very interesting. So we've got 4 books I'll just talk about now, and they're a mixture of kind of science and literature, because there's a strong link there. So the first one is The Botany of Desire by Michael Pollan, who's a food journalist, food writer, really great writer. And you might know him if you watched his 4-part Netflix series, which I would highly recommend. It was absolutely great, which is sort of about his view of the elements of food, which I think were time, heat, fire and heat, like time, which was to do with fermentation. I think one was about sugar. I can't really remember off the top of my head, sorry, but I'll put details about it below. And The Botany of Desire is quite an old text of his, but it's interesting because he puts forward this theory that instead of us harvesting the plants for our needs, maybe it is in fact the plants that have reacted sort of through natural selection, reacted and sort of figured out that they can get themselves to survive by tricking us to think that we're in control of them by reproducing the traits that we find desirable. And he breaks this down into different sections and explores 4 different types of plants, which are the apple, which are hemp, cannabis, tulips, and the potato. And super interesting take on it. And his writing is just really lovely. It's very well researched, it's very accessible and personable, it's got a really lovely tone, and I think he's just so passionate about kind of real plants and real food, by which I mean sort of the way that he really considers the, you know, long-term effects of what does it mean that we are eating genetically modified food that may have had like pesticides and kind of self-destruction inbuilt to the plant and things like that. So yeah, really enjoyed that. And then quite different from The Botany of Desire, which sort of very nicely and successfully blended the sort of the personal, the anecdote with his research, with his sort of journalism and his communication skills and his storytelling, all blended very nicely. But totally different from that is Losing Eden, which came out quite recently this year. Losing Eden, Why Our Minds Need the Wild. And it's also written by a journalist. And I'm going to straight up and say I didn't really enjoy her way of writing, her actual style of writing, you know, the literary style. I didn't enjoy it, and I think it was unsuccessful in the sort of blending of the personal and the professional. But when it came to the more professional, the journalistic side, the facts and the figures, that was relayed really well. So the kind of the flowery stuff didn't quite work in this one, and sort of the anecdote and the memoir didn't work for me. I didn't think it was very well integrated. So, you know, I kind of had to ignore that side of it and delve into it for what I think it really succeeds at, which is basically a summary of recent scientific research into the effects, the long-term beneficial and significant effects of nature on our physical and mental health, essentially, why our minds need the wild. So it's basically a literature review, which basically means that she has gone out and found out what everyone else has been researching lately, and then she's relayed it to us in this book. And the disadvantage to my mind of this work is that she's quite, not scathing, but she's quite dismissive of qualitative research, of which Michael Pollan has combined qualitative research, which basically means in-depth, more personal, first-hand accounts, generally a little bit more based on narrative, but the quantitative research, which is to do with numbers, statistics, much larger and broader studies. So that's really what this book is about. It's about the numbers, the number crunching. So I think it's bad that she has been quite dismissive of the qualitative accounts, but there are a lot of qualitative accounts. But I think the benefits of this is basically like some people only believe numbers, even though you should be very wary of that because statistics can be manipulated extremely easily. And just because someone says, you know, studies show that blah, 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 but you need to actually look into the study. How big was the trial? Was it double blind? Like, was it actually a reliable study? Just saying that you've done a trial with with like a large number of people doesn't actually necessarily mean anything. So I'm very, very wary of quants, these kind of numbers, knowing how easily that they can actually be really misleading. But anyway, lots of people rely on numbers for proof, which again is a contested term, proof, and truth is contested. Anyway, let's not get into this. It's all getting very philosophical, and I've been dealing with philosophical concepts in my PhD methodology that I've been working and reworking over the last 6 months. I know what I'm doing in the methods, by the way. It's just literally writing down the philosophy behind why I'm doing what I'm doing. Yeah, I've been dealing with that for quite a while, so let's steer away from that. But anyway, the point I'm trying to say is she puts all of the numbers there for people that need the numbers, and that works really, really well, and it's super interesting. And a lot of it is just proving what we already knew, just making scientific proof of indigenous knowledge, traditional knowledge, home remedies, folk remedies, things that we know are true, like you will feel better after you go for a walk, after you exercise, after you stop and smell the flowers, after you learn the names of flowers. All this stuff is very basic, but some people need it to be presented as facts. And if you want to, have the resources that are very well presented and very well delivered to sort of translate the scientific facts for the layperson, then this book, Lucy Jones' Losing Eden, is definitely a great book to read. And I read it very, very quickly. I think I read it in like 24 hours, like across the course of a day. So then the next book is, I'm going to talk about this one, Walden by Henry David Thoreau. And this is a really classic text in nature writing. And it's, it's from the mid-19th century. So it's super, super out of date, and his views are out of date. And it's just, I've seen it referenced and read about it and read reviews of it by so many writers, and I thought, oh, let me just finally get round to reading it. And it's a product of its time. It's very, very weird, but what struck me was how his writing, like 170, 180 years ago, still comes across as so radical. It's so radical. The things that he's saying, when he's talking about how he wishes, in a kind of utopia, people would have their own land, but it would be a small piece of land, and it would be a small house that just met their needs, and they could live off the land. However, in cities, what people want is just more and more possessions to display the latest thing, and kind of wanting bigger and bigger and bigger houses for which they'll never be able to pay off their mortgages. The kind of situations that he's describing just seem so close to home with the, what's been dubbed the housing crisis in the UK, and so on and so forth. And yet, on the other hand, his views of women, of black people, of Native Americans is so questionable. And I say questionable because he actually really, really admires Native Americans, indigenous people, their practices, their architecture, their medicine, their craft and, artistry. So it's a little bit all over the place, a bit of a mixed bag, and I'm reading it very slowly because it's quite a lot to take in, and he's very, he's quite polemical. He really thinks that he's right, and everything that he's saying is the thing that people should follow, and yet, not very many people really did follow him, let's face it, because capitalism has grown and we haven't, reverted back to more indigenous practices of respecting the land. So Walden, Henry David Thoreau, it's entertaining, and it's a good book to read just to see what it really is actually, because it's problematic, but it is interesting, so I would actually recommend it, and I am enjoying it. And I think it's it's definitely this comparison of time that I've been enjoying the most, sort of seeing what he thought was brand new, or what he thought everyone should be doing, and seeing how it has or hasn't really been implemented now. So food for thought. So the last book that I wish to recommend, which I've got in paperback, the others were hardback. By the way, I buy a lot of my books secondhand, especially if they are old books, out of print books, because when you buy books first hand, if they're if they're recently published, then I think it's good to buy them brand new and in paperback, because it supports the author's statistics essentially. But authors don't get very much money from the sale of every book. But when it comes to older books, and I think it's okay to buy them buy them secondhand. And also I'll put the links to browse these books online below. If you wish to order them online, then obviously do so, but obviously if you buy them from your local bookstore, then it's sort of a better investment into community, especially if they are a registered business that are registered in your country. That means that they will actually pay tax. So, you know, I'll pop the links there below anyway for you to check out. But the last one is Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall-Kimmerer, which is one that I've heard recommended by a few other knitting podcasters actually, as well as you know, botany friends, and I absolutely loved this book because it sort of blends all of the three but with her own unique perspective. So basically the author is a professor of botany and of ecobiology, those subjects. Like I said, I'm a lay person. I'm not very good at these disciplinary barriers, but I can tell you all about the difference between clothing, fashion, dress and style, but not really so much when it comes to botany and ecology and biology. Don't know. But anyway, so yeah, she's a professor, so obviously that's the whole scientific side and all the number crunching and all the proofs and so on. But she's also writes from the perspective of herself as an indigenous person, Native American, and from her indigenous heritage that she has, you know, both learnt from her parents but also had to reclaim and reteach for herself in adulthood from, you know, other existing elders that she might have been related to. So it's a beautiful blend, and it works so well, and her writing is so gorgeous, just unbelievable. I mean, it's literally flowery. It's flowery because it's poetic, and it's flowery because it is just absolutely drenched in flowers, in nature, in trees, in rivers and the sky and fields and seeds and roots and bark, and I could just go on forever. And yeah, it's just absolutely gorgeous. And the main thing that her main argument in this book is that because there's been such a disconnection to the land due to the systems of capitalism, basically extreme consumer capitalism, as opposed to more indigenous hunter-gatherer societies, which, you know, live off the land and have a more mutual and long-standing respect for the land. But, you know, that's kind of gone in modern Western society. So because of that, there's this big disconnection from the land, which means that either people don't care about it, or they think that if they do care about it, you know, eco-warriors and her students and whatnot, they think that humans have only been harmful to the land, and they feel like we're sort of powerless. But she's arguing that if you love the land, you should be actively, and if you love the land, if you love Earth, the planet, if you love drinking water that isn't poisoned, if you love drinking air that isn't polluted, which is not possible where I live, for example, in London, which, you know, broke the limits for pollution. Like, it always breaks it like in January or February of the year for the whole year, like it surpasses the limits. Quite shocking. Yeah, sorry, I'm kind of rambling, but to summarize, if you love the land, then it's your responsibility to engage with it, because it's a mutually beneficial relationship. You know, the land will benefit from us caring for it, and we will benefit from us caring for the land as well, and it's cyclical. And also, you know, the fact of the matter is that so much in nature does depend on human interference that isn't really interference, it's this relationship of reciprocity. And she uses this metaphor of the gift throughout the book, talking about how if we harvest the gifts that nature gives us, like food, basically, medicines and healing and knowledge, we have to be ready to accept that gift. We can't just take it. Hi again, I just had to move location because I was disturbed in my filming by the other people that are currently occupying this household. So I just thought I'd finish off what I was saying in this little corner by the window that I'm in now. So yes, thanks for bearing with me. Obviously, you know, as far as we're concerned, we're still in lockdown. University is closed, work is closed, everything's closed, schools are closed, even though people are trying to sort of pretend that it's not happening anymore and pretend that the virus is not out there and that it's not a threat. And anyway, yeah, I think there's been this massive push both through lockdown and now after sort of easing lockdown, in which the government basically wants people to go out and buy stuff that they don't need. Like, all clothes shops reopened. What's the point of buying new clothes is my thought, because where are you going to wear them to? You know, you can't go to a restaurant, you can't have a big gathering or a big party, you can't, you know, go to a cafe, to the theatre. Anyway, I don't get it. But anyway, sort of on this topic anyways, what I was finishing off chatting about in braiding sweetgrass. So I really recommend it. Basically, she's got such an amazing way of writing, and her view on the world is influenced obviously by her Indigenous background, but it's uniquely her. It's something that's very special. And I think the way that she tries to persuade, you know, the manner in which she tries to persuade the readers about the importance and long-standing validity and sort of how essential it really is to care for the earth, for the planet, is something that I don't think that I've encountered elsewhere. But I would really enjoy hearing from you guys if there's any sort of nature writing or ecology, kind of botany books that you have recently read and would recommend. I'm really enjoying reading on this subject, especially from, you know, a multitude of voices. It occurs to me that now that I've moved, I might not have explained Walden very well. Walden is basically a very strange, polemical text about a man that tries to give up everything and build his own cabin and live in the woods, and that's what he's writing about. So it's based on real experiences, and he's very inspired by other cultures, whilst obviously being of his time and position as a white man, not to really understand them sort of for really what they were. So I realised that I mentioned that he writes in quite a questionable and problematic way about black people and Indigenous Americans, but also, like, he's not very nice about the Chinese, the Arabs. He likes the Indians. You know, it's sort of like pick and choose your culture from the world is sort of the way that he's approaching it. Whereas obviously Kimmerer, writing 150 to 80 years. The reason that I'm being quite broad about the bracket, because the book was published in 2013, but obviously it draws on her experience and her writings throughout her career, you know, dating back many decades. So obviously, you know, this book is coming from a completely different place and is also looking at the land of America, and is also considering what's happened with, you know, the kind of outcome of capitalist and industrial factory mechanized production. So it's sort of like he wasn't actually successful here, and then she sort of then documenting it and speaking back and relearning lots of new traditions here. So yeah, definitely recommend Braiding Sweetgrass, and I'll probably look into reading her other book as well, which is about moss, which is definitely not something that I would have thought I would read about, but it's just, if you read it, you will see what I mean literally on the very first page. Her writing is just so special. And I think that the reason that she's so interesting, well, there's many reasons, but the reason that it really speaks to me is that relationship of loving the land and caring for the land and being active with it. So sort of the explorations that I've been doing recently, learning about traditional herbal medicines, Western herbal medicines, foraging, just learning how to name the bushes and the trees in my local area, which are quite common ones, but discovering that they also have medicinal purposes, you know, things like that. All of those activities that you can do, gardening, you know, planting a house plant, planting more, discovering that if you plant a lemon-leafed geranium, the one that when you rub the leaves there's a really strong citrus smell, you can dry the leaves, you can put them in sugar, they'll infuse the sugar, you can bake them into a cake, you know, all of these oldie fashioned remedies and recipes that you can bring into your daily life and make that connection, which I think inspires one to make larger movements and, you know, make more activities that might be more significant. Because I think at the end of the day, everybody knows the statistics, everyone knows about Blue Planet, everyone knows about air pollution, plastic pollution, environmental pollution, and yet a lot of the time I think one feels like one is preaching to the converted, you know, talking to people that already see it as an issue, and yet there just seems to be so many other people that are unwilling to make the genuine structural changes, like at the highest levels, in terms of both government and industry, and also in an interconnected way in terms of government regulating industry. And this is kind of what I mean about, you know, the shops being opened at the expense of everybody's health, because of the economy. But, you know, there are all those pictures in the news of people queuing, like enormous queues outside Primark, which is like an extremely cheap fast fashion chain. And I just think it's such a shame that all of the sort of the building on handcrafts and the sort of learning that was going on and self-sufficiency that many people, obviously not all, but that many people developed during lockdown, doesn't seem to have had an immediate effect on lots of people, including my friends and my family, like people that I love a lot, are just, you know, desperate to go out and go shopping. And that's because in our society, in our consumer capitalist society, shopping is seen as a valid and enjoyable activity, and its consequences, waste, you know, pollution in terms of the production, pollution in terms of the disposal of items, the way that that interacts with other species and our own, and the land, you know, our environment, it's just like put out of mind. And I think that that's something that is a really big issue, like how to inspire people to continue making actions, you know, looking after the environment, not just caring about it in theory, but actually doing things that will have much longer impact in our daily life. And, you know, as I said, it has to go beyond individual actions and influence, you know, genuine structural change. So those are my thoughts. As you can see, quite disappointed in the reopening of shops, basically, you know, and that's just me. And I do my best to try and find ways to work my philosophy about this, you know, my way of being and thinking and living into the outlets that I have, into my YouTube, into my Instagram, into my newsletters, and it's always really lovely to hear back from other people who are like-minded, and occasionally my audience also tells me that I've inspired them to make some changes, so thank you very much for sticking with me. I'm going to wind this down now, because you've probably heard quite a lot of ambient noises going on, like there's just a lot going on in general, isn't there? So yeah, I'm going to wind this down. Before I close though, I would like to say a big massive thank you to everybody who has recently bought me a coffee over on Ko-fi, and also to anyone who has recently downloaded one of my knitting patterns on Ravelry. Thank you so much for your support, which enables me to do this work, to do this creative work, to document it, to create, you know, helpful videos and teach and share my knowledge with you. It's something that I love doing. It's something that I feel very, very grateful for, you know, even in this very small manner, you know, doing it just like a couple of days, couple of evenings a week. It means that I'm able to work as a creative practitioner, which is something that has been so difficult in the past. So I'm so grateful for this opportunity and your support. Thank you so much. And if you're interested and if you'd like to support me financially, the links for that can be found in the down bar below here on YouTube. But a big thank you from me. And also just a quick note, Ravelry has changed over the last week. They've updated their system and they've got a new look and stuff, and it's quite controversial. It's been quite controversial. I have discovered that there's a possibility of like reverting back to the old version of Ravelry for the moment if you're not enjoying the new Ravelry. But obviously my patterns are available for download on Ravelry, and I host my discussion groups there through my Ravelry group. I've got like threads and stuff in the forum. But I've been considering the process of possibly selling my knitting patterns on other sources than Ravelry as well. I know that you can purchase patterns on Lovecraft and also Etsy, and I just wondered if anyone had any thoughts on that, basically because I guess I'm kind of from that Ravelry wave of knitting on the internet, where sort of Ravelry is the only thing that I've ever used, known and liked. So yeah, I'd be interested to hear if you guys think that that's something that I could pursue, listing my existing knitting patterns on other websites, and you know, if so, what do you like about other websites, and would you use them, or do you think it's okay and I should just stick to Ravelry for now? I hope that you've all been well and staying creative, and if not feeling creative, just managing to, you know, get equal parts of rest and movement into your life. That's really my prescription for happiness, or contentment, I should say, really. That's, yeah, I'm gonna sign it off here. Thanks very much for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, do give me a thumbs up, drop me a comment below, subscribe to my newsletter if you'd like to hear more from me, especially my more rambly thoughts that I put out at some point at the beginning of every month. Thanks so much for being here at the Crimson Stitchery. Take care, everyone.